Alright guys, welcome to Irish Footy Vlogs. I'm delighted to welcome Tom Stafford from Cobh today. Now Tom is going to pick his Cobh Greatest 11. How are you, Tom? You well?
Yeah, very good now. Disappointed that the season's over and there's not as much football on, but look, it was great to have it, and thanks for having me on the show as well.
No bother at all. Before we get into that, a few questions about Cobh, obviously this season, that kind of thing as well. We're just chatting a little bit off air. Bittersweet season for Cobh, I suppose, because they did have a strong season, but just missed out in the playoffs. And they were a bit unlucky, really, in the end, weren't they?
Yeah, it ended up being goal difference, which was disappointing. But look, to be in with a shout on the last day, you can't ask for much more than that. And it's a young squad there. The Stewart and Deck have a lot of players that are only in maybe their first or second season at this level. So I think there's a lot to build on for next year, and we're definitely looking forward to it. The Cork Derbies will be back in the first division, which doesn't happen too often. So there'll be a lot of big games next year, and hopefully there'll be fans there to watch them.
Yeah, Cobh will be happy about that, but I suspect Cork City won't be too happy about having a Cork Derby next year.
No, probably not. It's been a while since there was a one in the league. We've had a few like Munster Cup games and friendlies, but 2008 was the last season they played each other, and that was in the Premier, so they were brilliant events. So even if we can have half of what those type of games are, then we're in for a treat, I'd say.
Now, I was just saying there, I watched the Shamrock Rovers B game myself, and I was just saying to you as well how Cobh threw, literally the kitchen sink at them, didn't they? Corners, free kicks, crosses. Shamrock Rovers, in fairness to them, they'd nothing to play for, but somehow they kind of stuck their neck in the line in that game for some reason. And I think Cobh missed Dave Hurley. I think he had an injury coming into the game. He came on, obviously. But how were you feeling after that game or during that game as well?
Yeah, it was such a pity. Like they really did give it everything, but wasn't meant to be. And when the team sheet came in first, the Rovers two team, like they would have players you'd know like Brandon Kavanagh and Dean Williams, but none of them were in the team. So it was a Rovers two team that we fancied our chances against at home. I think it's a game that if there was a crowd there, it would have probably made the difference. Those young Rovers lads wouldn't have been used to it, and it's a tough place to go when there's a couple of hundred, couple of thousand Cork people shouting at you. So I think that was definitely not in our favour. But look, you have to give credit to Rovers. They do have some great young players, and there's a lot of 16, 17-year-olds out there, and it's almost scary how good these lads coming through are, that Rovers have them at their disposal. But look, we look forward to next season, and I think that's the way to be positive and optimistic about 2021.
Yeah, it's probably important that Cobh can keep as many players as it possibly can. You've experienced with Ian Turner and John Kavanagh and players like that. But then you've got the likes of Charlie Lyons. Obviously, Dave Hurley is a very good player too. He's one of the best in the first division, in my opinion. You had great results this season, though. You won up in Drogheda, you won up in Galway, and you won up in Longford. They were cracking results, though, weren't they, in fairness?
Yeah, it doesn't happen often that our away form is better than our home form, but that was the case this year. All the big performances, they came on the road. Thankfully, they were streamed, by the other clubs, so the fans got to see them, even though it was away from home. But yeah, I think the away form is something that they'll look to be happy with next year, and if they can match it, then that's a success. I think the home form is where we let ourselves down. It was the defeat to UCD. It was a draw with Galway. We could have won that. There was the Cavan defeat last minute of the game. Like, there's a lot of points there that would have been the difference in the end. But yeah, the lads put in a lot of great shifts on the road. Games that we definitely went into as underdogs. Like the Galway one, really, if we didn't win that, that was the end of the season. Same with Longford. So it was great to see that the lads, even though they're young, they kind of have those performances in their locker, and hopefully now we can have a few more of those next year.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you feel the last few seasons, obviously under Henderson and Ashton, the club seem to be moving forward? What are the main reasons for that in your view?
Yeah, definitely. I think since probably 2015, 2016, it's kind of been onward success. And like, we only came into the league in 2013 after a few years of just playing like A Championship and under 19 football. So I think those first few seasons, like, they were very tough, but it was just getting the club back into the league, and look, even having any 11 out on the pitch was a success. But now it's kind of, look, we can build on that, and I think there's a lot of work being done to try and get the club back in the community, because obviously if you go 5-6 years of not being there effectively, then people are going to forget about Ramblers. But the last few years has been about getting people aware, like, this is your club. Like, there's only 20 League of Ireland clubs in the country, and your town has one of them. So that's been a big thing. And I think the youth structures have been formalised more. So Now before it was like you had your 19th team and 17th team, but it was almost just to like fulfill the requirements. And now I think Ivan Bevan is in there as the head of youth development, and he does a great job in kind of making sure that there's a pathway there, and we're seeing that lads are coming all the way through now, which is a big thing. I think that's for every club. The fact that every club in the country has these lads from 13, 14 all the way up, they're ingrained in the club. They know what it means, and they're probably better players for it as well because they've been playing such a high level. So I think it's probably a combination of the community aspect and just the professionalism of the underage structures. It means clubs like Cobh are in a good place.
Is there many actual local guys in the team from Cobh at this minute in time?
The first team wouldn't. There'd be kind of two on the fringes, but like
there's quite a few
probably,
from Cork. There is quite a few.
Yeah, no, it'd be very much a Cork-based team with a few others, the likes of Darrell Walsh and Lee Davis added in from kind of across Munster. But like the under-19 team of a squad of 20, there's 7 of those are from Cobh. So that's a good ratio for what is effectively a small town. I think we forget, we've about 12, 14,000 people on the island, which is not that big. So even to have that, but I think people will always want more Cobh lads, and I think the team that came back in 2013 was a lot of Cobh players, and that was why they had good crowds, because it was lads everyone from the town knew. So I think trying to get back to that is definitely an aim, but people are realistic as well. We're not going to have 11 out there on the pitch from this little town and still be able to compete. So I think there's a balance there, and I think it's definitely something that can be achieved in the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, like Cork City are obviously the big club in Cork, but they can't have every young player going, that kind of way. So, from Cobh's point of view, if they can kind of branch out a little bit, and I'm sure they are looking into that kind of market as well, aren't they, though, more or less?
Yeah, no, it's something we've always kind of made use of, is lads coming out of 19s football with City, and realistically they know they're not going to get a look in, especially when Cork were challenging for leagues. It's why like Kev Taylor would have come down here. Few others in recent years. Denzel Fernandez was another one. Adam Mylott, the goalkeeper, with a few years of him. So people, they're realistic. They know, look, I'll get my first division games. I'll get first team experience, and we're happy to have them. And look, if they end up moving on, it's all the best to them, because we are realistic as well. Like that happened with Cian Coleman. We got a year out of him, and then I think Limerick were in the Premier. They snapped him up, and there are going to be players like that. But we can just make the most of those couple of years, and then you never know, you might get them back in a few years' time. So I think Cork is a huge county. It's a football mad county. So there's always a big player pool there, and it's good for Cobh that we can obviously bring through our own players, but if there are lads with City, we can kind of mould them into the side as well.
You're part of the media team at Cobh as well. How long are you doing that for?
Yeah, so kind of that 2013 year we came back.
So since the beginning, since you returned.
Yeah, pretty, like just doing bits and pieces. I think it's kind of gotten more professionalised in recent years. I think the whole league has. Before it was just you had a Twitter account, you had a Facebook, but now I think there's a bit more work in it, in a good way. Like all the clubs are very good at what they do. There's getting audio interviews, there's getting your highlights, getting like match previews and stuff. It's very well done by all the clubs, and we have a good team here. Compared to when it started, it was literally just, I remember I was at a game up in Salt Hill, Devon, and the fella who was running the Twitter was one of the players' dads, and he knew he didn't want to be stuck with it, so he asked me, look, on the updates there, we end up losing up in Salt Hill.
But Twitter as well, the poor man.
I know, yeah. No, he did a great job, in fairness. We just kind of went from there, and last few years now it's going on to bigger things. But I think that's down to the league. I think the league is looking more professional, and it has to be, because we're competing with huge leagues and huge sports. So if we can't look our best online, then we've no chance.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, most of the clubs I've seen as well, like they do great work. They need help though. They need more help, and we all know that from the FAI, etc., etc. But what the volunteers are doing at clubs, etc. It's fantastic work. It's great to see. I suppose we'll get into your first to 11 now. Who are we going for? What formation are you going for actually for a start?
I'm going 4-3-3. I managed a team in college, and 4-3-3 was my formation then, so it didn't do too bad for me with UCC.
So I think 4-3-3 man as well.
yeah. No, it was hard, very hard to make the choices, but And like there's some big lads that I've had to leave out, but I hope no one watching gives out to me, because I've tried to be fair as much as I can.
Can't pick everybody. Who have you gone for in goal?
Yeah, so I've gone with a Cobh and a Cork legend, Michael Devine. So he only retired a couple of years ago at the age, I think he was 44 when he retired. But he's most known for his time with Cork City. He won leagues and cups with them in kind of the early mid noughties. But he's actually from Cobh. He started his League of Ireland career off here. So he went off to England as a youngster, had a spell with Middlesbrough, Newcastle. Came back then kind of 1920 and needed to get some League of Ireland experience. So he was down here for about 5 years in the 90s, played a huge part in the club during that decade, and then went off to Waterford and then City, and became such a big name then. But I think even in that 5 year spell, he really stood out as a young keeper in the league. So he's my number one.
Yeah, he's playing for so long, you'd almost forget he was a Cobh, or even playing in the 90s. It's mad when you think about it.
Yeah. And even like when he was at Cobh Ramblers, so that was the club he finished up with. So they got to an intermediate cup final in the Aviva, and he was 44, I think, playing in the final in the Aviva, which is incredible. And like you wouldn't have known it, like by the way he looks, he looked as young as the rest of them out there. So kept himself in great shape. But yeah, he gave great service to the club, and he's such a popular character around Cork. So it's definite that I put him in there. But there was a few other keepers I had in mind. In more recent times, Paul Hunt was a great servant to the club, well over 100 appearances, and he was there in the playoffs in 2016, and so he was in my mind. Stephen Henderson himself, when he played, he had a great career as well in the kind of 90s. So there's plenty of names out there, but I've gone with Mick Devine, and I think not too many will disagree with me.
That's a good choice. On to right back.
Yeah, so this one is a player from kind of a similar era to Devine, a bit after. His name is Packy Kelly. So maybe not the most household name outside of Cobh, but he's the most capped player ever at the club from Cobh. I think all competitions he made about 450 appearances, 350-ish in the league. So hugely experienced right back. Kind of someone described him once as like the Dennis Darwin of Cobh Ramblers. You kind of forgot he was there a lot of the time, but never ever messed up. First name on the team sheet. Retired from League of Ireland, I think it was maybe 03, 04-ish. But yeah, great servant to the club and captained the club most games he played. He just loved League of Ireland. He, even as he got older, and some lads would kind of leave it by the wayside, he just loved getting out there, traveling the country. And yeah, I think definitely one that no one will disagree with.
On to left back.
So the left back I've chosen is the player who captained Ramblers when we won the first division in 07. So that's John Mead, another Cobh man. So that's 3 out of 3 so far. So definitely all from Cobh so far. Well, I suppose I'm from Cobh too, so these are the lads I might see on the street, so to keep them happy.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
But yeah, John was a brilliant player. I think he was only 22 or 23 when he actually captained that team. So he was a huge part of that side. And then when they got up to the Premier, played that year. I think the years that we spent out of the League of Ireland, for the likes of John and his era of players, it's even more of a pity because they never really got to show their stuff for Cobh. Like a lot of them had to go off to other clubs then. So he was at City for a bit. But he came back in 2013. There was a group of kind of more older players came back when we had that first year back in the league. And I think it was great for the likes of him and a few others that they got to have their final season with Ramblers in the League of Ireland. But he continued to play for Cobh Wanderers, and I think he's still playing with Ringmahon at the moment. So he's still playing at a high level, and he's just a terrific left back. What's that?
How old is he now at this stage?
Oh, I'd say he's about 34, 35-ish, but he always kept himself very fit, yeah.
On to centre-back, your first centre-back anyway, Tom.
So my first centre-back is a member of the famous 1983 side that got all the way to the semi-finals of the FAI Cup against Sligo Rovers. So I think when you mention Ramblers, a lot of people of a certain era, that's what they remember, is that famous game. So I went to 4 games against Sligo before Sligo eventually beat us after the third replay. And that centre back is Eddie O'Halloran, so he was a huge part of that side. he spent about 20 years at the club altogether between the 70s and into the mid 90s. And he was a terrific centre back, a bit before my time, but I've watched videos of that side, and he was a huge part of it. Even though we were not playing in the League of Ireland at the time, he got moved to Waterford and Cork United. So he was highly regarded. But I think Cobh was always where he wanted to play, and then he played a huge role in kind of our first few seasons in the or in the first division, because it was a step up. But he was able to kind of adapt to it, and most of that squad was, because that's how good they were. But yeah, I put him at centre back. He took penalties as well a few times, so he'll be able to go on those for this best 11.
Is he another Cobh man? Yeah,
he is indeed. Yeah. There is a bit of a trend. Yeah, the majority, yeah, but I think, if you ask anyone, they're the lads that it means the most to play for Cobh. Like, it means a lot to everyone, but when you're a young lad and you're living across the way from the St. Coleman's Park, it has that extra kind of bit of speciality, I think.
Yeah, no, it has to. On to your next centre back.
Yeah, so this fella, maybe not as well known as some of the others, and possibly a bit of a surprise, but I've gone with Brendan Frall. So he was a kind of a young centre back when we came into the league back in 2013, but he kind of came through the under 19s, and I thought he really stood out for me. It was a pity that those weren't our best years on the pitch, because I think for a person like him, they deserve maybe a few medals, or just to have done a bit more in their career, because I thought he was excellent in those couple of seasons when it wasn't going as well on the pitch as it has maybe in more recent years. Gave everything to the club. Then it was kind of due to work commitments and things like that. He had to step away, and it was when he had to step away, then it just started to, the good times, I suppose, started to come in, which is a bit of a shame for him. But cracking centre back, no nonsense defender, really gave you everything on the pitch. One of those centre backs that if you're stuck for a goal, you throw him up top in the last 5 minutes, and he probably got you a goal or two. But a big man monster of a defender. He's still playing with Cobh Ramblers in the senior league, which is good to see, because he's not that old at all. He's still like 26, 27. So, but yeah, I've gone with.
Do you think he's a player, that could still play? Say first division level, even? Do you think he's capable?
I think so, definitely. If he, like, quality wise, there's no fear of that. I think the job he has, it just doesn't suit the League of Ireland travelling. And look, I think that's part and parcel of. You just have to accept that. But look, you never say never. I mean, he could end up back in a Ramblers jersey, but the fact that he's still representing Cobh at a good football level is good. Yeah, I'm with Brendan Frall there.
Fantastic stuff. So on to your first of your three midfielders, central midfield players.
Yeah, so the first of my team, actually not from Cobh, but we may as well adopt him at this stage. I've gone with Darren Murphy. So Darren, possibly more well known for his time at Cork City, and then he got his move over to England from there. But Darren started his League of Ireland career with Ramblers. So he's from the city, came down at about the age of 16, 17, got looking in the first division side. He was definitely a no-nonsense defending midfielder. So had a bit of an eye for a goal, but he's well known for his tackling, and he doesn't leave anything out on the pitch. So I've gone with him. He went on to have a great career, went over to England. Stevenage was the club that he kind of found a home over there, and he played in the playoffs with them. He got to play in Wembley in the FA Trophy final. So he really had a great career. Injury sort of made that a bit tricky for him, and he came back to Cork in about 2013, I think. But just injuries had taken their toll, and that was kind of a result of the type of player he was. He was always getting stuck in midfield and probably didn't help the legs, but had a great career. And his time at Ramblers, like, he stood out, even though he was quite young and quite raw. He still had a good few seasons with us. Came back as assistant manager in 2016 under Stephen Henderson when we got to the playoffs. So played his role off the pitch there, and now he's managing Wanderers in the senior league. So great servant to Cobh and Cobh football, even though he's not even from here.
I was about to say that he's definitely adopted the Cobh way, hasn't he?
Yeah, no, you'd see him around the place a lot. He knows everyone in the town. He's a very good football man, very clever. Knows a lot about the game, and for young lads coming through, he's a great fella to learn from. But he was great as a player back in the day as well, so I wasn't too surprised to put him in there.
Perfect. So midfielder number 2.
Yeah, I've gone with a player you know quite well. I've gone with the current midfielder, Dave Hurley. So he's on about 80 appearances from Twickenham, which I think is enough to justify putting him in the team, even though he's still quite young. I think I have to put in players from recent times that I have seen more in the flesh than the older lads. But I think anyone who's seen Dave in recent years, like you can't disagree with the effort he puts in, the talent he has. Um, Started off more of an attacking midfielder in his first year or two with the first team, and definitely when he was at 19s level, he was known as your number 10 who kept scoring screamers. I think in the last couple of years, he's kind of become more of an 8 or a 6. He still has an eye for a goal, but would be more of a all-around midfielder. This season, he played almost every game. I think he missed the win away in Wexford because of suspension, but the injuries in the last few games he meant he only played kind of half games and things like that. But he loves the club.
Actually, funnily enough, may have cost Cobh a little bit, funnily enough, in the last few games as well, possibly. They could have
Yeah,
been where they didn't pick, you know what I mean? Like, possibly, like, missing him.
yeah, I think there was still a good midfield in there, but I think he had the experience which maybe other lads didn't have. But I think low injuries are part of every team, and you're not going to go the whole season with your best 11 every week. So thankfully we had him for a lot of the season, and hopefully we have him again next year. He's from Cork, he's studying up in UCC, so he just loves playing League of Ireland, and he gives it everything on the pitch. So I think Dave will slot in there nicely.
Yeah, I've seen him play live actually up in Drogheda. I was actually at the game, and he dominated that midfield against Drogheda that day. He was playing as you say, he was playing more of a 6. He was taking the ball off the central defenders and pinging them left and right and nonchalantly. You know what I mean? It's very simple for him. But you're right, he's got all round midfield abilities, which means he can play any style of midfield game as well.
Yeah, and the Rovers game on the last day of the season, he came on as a sub that game, and it was the most attacking I've probably ever seen him play. They basically put him on as an extra striker, which wasn't something a lot of us were used to. Unfortunately, it didn't work, but look, I think that shows that he's able to still do it up front and in more of an attacking sense. So I think in this team, he'll do nicely and kind of cover a lot of area on the pitch.
Absolutely. So on to our third midfielder.
Yeah, so I've gone with another Cobh man. So a family that are hugely synonymous with the club, and he is John O'Rourke. So John played with the club in the early '90s. Kind of, there was when they got promoted to the Premier for only the second time. He was a big part of that team. He went off to Shelbourne then because Damien Richardson, who had managed Cobh for a small bit, he was impressed with him, and then Damien got the Shelbourne job and brought John up with him. But he was still here for about 4 or 5 years. Came back then as a manager himself, even though he was still quite young. He got the manager gig, and really impressive midfielder, well able to score goals, but do the dirty work as well. So I think, yeah, just if anything, to represent the O'Rourke family, who've had a huge amount of that clan have played for the club, and it's still going today. With Michael O'Rourke is involved on the fringes of the first team, so he'd be a nephew to John. So he deserves a spot definitely on the pitch.
Fantastic stuff. I suppose we'll go to the left wing now.
Yeah, so this position, I think there's no one going to disagree with me on this one. Probably the first player I thought of when I was asked to do this is Davin O'Neill. So Davin is a Cobh man, born and bred. He has again, the O'Neills are a huge football family in Cobh, involved in Ramblers throughout the last 50 years probably. So Davin kind of came into the side in probably 04, 05 as a young fella. He was down in Wanderers, and they kind of spotted him and asked him to train with the League of Ireland side. So got his break. Played a huge role in the first division winning team in 07 and was there in 08 as well. Then got a move to Cork City when they were kind of after the Forest regime first came in. So he helped them get promoted that time with Graham Cummins and a few others. So a really tricky winger. Well able to score some cracking goals and beat his man. Just a player you love to watch, and I think he's a fella. If you're paying your tenner at the gate, you don't mind it at all because you're getting to see the quality that he has. He came back then in 2013, so he was alongside John Mead and a few of the others. They got that one last season for Cobh, and I remember the last day of the season, we beat Waterford 2-1. Waterford were going very well that year. So even though we were kind of just there as our first season, they were pushing for the playoffs. But we managed to beat them on the last day of the year. He got the 2 goals. I think that was a nice way for him to finish off his League of Ireland career for someone who'd given so much to the club, and he still played after at local level and was brilliant to him, and even to see him just still playing at a bit of an older age, but great player, great servant to the club, and a lovely fella as well.
Would a lot of those players you mentioned as well, would they go to a lot of the games still? Like, obviously not at the moment, but you know what I mean. In general, would they go to the games or?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and a lot of them would coach on underage sides here, like maybe under 10s, their own kids, and those kids would play at half time. So you'd see them, out on the pitch at half time, minding all these under 9s. So I think that's nice to see. But yeah, it's good that there is that connection still, even though they've retired and still have busy lives. They're still managed to get a game or two in, which is good to see.
That's great. Onto the right wing now.
So I've gone. He's probably more of a striker than a right winger, but look, he'll do a job out here, I think. So I've gone with Kieran O'Reilly. Again, a member of that 07 winning team. Probably more known now as being the father of Adam O'Reilly, who's with Preston, and he's really impressing there. But his old man wasn't a bad footballer in his day as well. But yeah, Kieran was
learned a thing or two off him anyway.
I think so. Yeah, Kieran was the top scorer in the first division in 05 and scored a huge amount of goals in those kind of early naughty years. So gave almost a decade of service. He joined in 2000, I think it was, from Rockmount, stepping up to League of Ireland for the first time, and played all the way until 2008, that year in the Premier. So he was finished as the club's top scorer most years. He beat Davin O'Neill just about to a lot of those tallies, but a great servant to the club and brilliant player. I think, again, similar to Davin, he's a player you wanted to see out there on the ball. You were amazed by his talent, and I was only young when the likes of him and Davin were in the team, and just seeing those lads, you kind of thought these are your superstars, and I think that's a good sign as a player.
Your centre forward now.
So this one is another member of that 83 team. So he's an uncle of Davin O'Neill. His name is Frank Sniffer O'Neill. So I think ask anyone who's followed Ramblers and best striker we've ever had, Sniffer is the only name that comes into your head. He was a huge part of that 83 winning team. He scored most of the goals in those clashes. I know he got the one in the 4th game up in Sligo that we thought would have been enough. Unfortunately, Sligo came back and just clinched that semi-final. But look, that was a completely amateur Ramblers team, and they put it up to full-time Sligo. To the 4th replay, unfortunately, wasn't meant to be. But I think that cup run kind of set the tone that, look, this club can go places. We're not just a small team in Cork. We can step up to the national level, and Frank was a huge part of that. Spent almost all his career in Cobh, as far as I know. It was a bit before my time, but I don't remember him being known as a player who played with anyone else. He played in senior league with them, played in League of Ireland with them, and was a huge part of all those successes under Liam McMahon. So I think he's the person that no one will be angry I put him in.
I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here. If you had to pick a manager to manage his team.
I think there's no question. Again, it's the late Liam McMahon. He sadly passed away last year, which was very tough to hear. But he's anyone would say he's the person you would say. He managed 70s, the 80s, the 90s, came back the early 2000s for a small spell. They won 2 intermediate cups, entered the League of Ireland, got to the semi of the FAI Cup. They won, I think it was 9 out of 10 senior leagues during a decade. I mean, like that league is a very high caliber, and to win 9 of them out of 10, it's unheard of. And he was the manager for every single one of them. So there's a lot of good managers we've had, Stephen Henderson, Stuart Ashton in recent times, but McMahon's record speaks for itself. So he's managing this team. I think only probably 2 or 3 actually played under him, but he'll have no problem in managing this lot.
I suppose you wouldn't remember all of them, to be fair. All the players that played in 1983, put it that way.
I know, yeah. There was like that. There was a lot of players in that side that I was thinking of putting in, but I think because I didn't get to see them, I just kind of felt like I could speak a bit more about some of the others. But like Fergus McDade, George Mellerick, they were huge parts of that team as well. So you could probably just say that the 11 that took Sligo to 4 games and put that down, and
Yeah.
a lot of people would be happy with it. But I think I have a nice balance of lads from the 80s, 90s, noughties, and a few from the 10s as well. So I'm happy with that.
100%, Tom. Look, Tom, thanks very much for coming on. I really enjoyed that. And to be honest, I probably learnt an awful lot, because some of the other ones I do, I probably know a bit more, if I'm honest. And 1983, I've heard of the names, but again, it's before my time. So it's good to learn a bit as well. Thanks very much, Tom. I appreciate that.
Thanks very much for having me, and it's something I really enjoyed. So fair play on everything you're doing. It's great to have a show like this, and weekly episodes covering the Premier Division and the First Division. I think you give great coverage to that league, which it's a league that doesn't get enough media attention, but thankfully shows like yourself, they help in a big way. And yeah, just for me, like helping Cove's media, when you see kind of third parties like yourself doing that bit as well, it's always helpful, because like there's other people out there who are doing their bit as well. So thanks very much.
Appreciate that. Thanks very much, Tom.